This week on Inside the Headset, we are featuring William & Mary's head coach, Mike London. In this episode, Coach London speaks on the importance of having a healthy work-life balance, highlights the offseason program he implemented to develop his players for beyond the field, and shares the benefit of cultivating relationships with high school coaches in your state. But first, a word from our sponsor. The All-State AFCA Good Works team has been one of the most esteemed honors in college football for more than 25 years. The student-athletes who are nominated for this award demonstrate a unique dedication to community service and desire to make a positive impact on the world around them. The Good Works team is comprised of 11 players from the FBS and 11 players from the FCS, Division II, Division III, and NAIA, as well as one honorary head coach. To be in consideration by All-State and the AFCA for a nomination, each player must be actively involved with a charitable organization or service group while maintaining a strong academic standing. Past Good Works team members include notable players such as Peyton and Eli Manning and Tim Tebow. Coaches, do you have a player that you think embodies the values of a Good Works team? Be sure to connect with your SID to discuss potential nominees. To nominate a player or head coach, have your SID email Vince Thompson at vince@afca.com by May 23rd of this year, 2022.
Coach London, thanks so much for joining us again. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me again. Good to see you.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Well, no disrespect to all the many guests we've had on the podcast, because I always enjoy when I'm in my car, riding around, just going back and listening to all the great things coaches have said on this thing. But by far, my favorite podcast was the one with you a few years back that we recorded when you kind of talked about your days as a detective and kind of how that came to an end, and then obviously with your daughter, the bone marrow, all the kind of amazing stuff that kind of goes on behind the scenes of a coach.
I appreciate that, and it's when it happens, it's real life, and you can relate it to the young men that you're responsible for, and things perhaps that they've kind of been through. It's been a blessing. So it's one of those things that I'm always looking to share stories that may be relevant with what's happening, in people's lives. And same way people share with me, I do the same thing. And it's kind of that pay it forward aspect.
Absolutely. Well, obviously on that podcast, and anybody that's listening, I would strongly encourage you to go back and take a listen. But we kind of dove into the story of your daughter, and needing a bone marrow transplant and all that good stuff. And so, I didn't realize at that point in time there was a lot more to the story about family that's going on with you as a coach. And so, since your time at Howard, you've actually had the opportunity to have your son coach alongside of you as the receivers coach, I believe. What has this experience been like, and how is that balance of that professionalism, wanting to give your son advice, just managing all that kind of dynamic on your staff for the last couple of years?
Yeah, that's great. Real quick, so let me go back to Tyson. Now she's a full-time athletic trainer in Suffolk, Virginia, at a high school.
Oh wow!
And so she's running the show now as a trainer, because when she was at Johns Hopkins, the nurses were coming up, getting people up, walking around, and doing rehab. She said, "That's what I want to do." So we had our camps this past summer, and she was one of the trainers that we had. And so it was kind of crazy. I was talking to, there was a young kid, he's about, ninth grade. He was woozy a little bit. He was going back and forth. And she walks out onto the field, and she grabs him and looks at me and says, "Coach, he's done. He's done. He's coming with me." I'm like, so what coach is going to tell the trainer, hey, you can't take this guy off the field? And then when she's walking the guy off the field, he turns around, looks over his shoulder, and says, "What time's dinner tonight?" So it's like, everything went full circle for that moment right there. But it's just really a blessing that, the story, what she's doing now, and having that moment right there where she played the big ace card on me right there, being a trainer.
That's awesome.
And then asked about what time's dinner, so. The whole family thing about like Mike Jr., he was coaching high school ball in New Jersey. I got the Howard opportunity, and he was ready kind of to make that leap, and I was ready to help him be successful in any way possible in terms of, coaching, recruiting, and all those things. And he joined the staff there for 2 years, did a great job with the receivers. And then so as I transitioned here to William & Mary, he's the receiver coach again. He's a video coordinator. He handles our graphics. He handles student filmers. And so the responsibility, has been given to him to do well. There's an expectation, as you would know. Anytime you put your name on something, you want it to be done well and right. And he's done a good job with that. So it's pretty neat to just kind of watch a maturation process with him. My daughter Tyson, my daughter Kristen plays professional football for the Denver Bandits. And she's out there doing her thing. She was a DB, and now she's like a defensive end. It's kind of crazy when your daughters are asking you for advice, and you think about, okay, color of sofas and what you gonna do with this and paint this. And she's like, hey, when you play bump press coverage, Dad, or when you're setting the edge, are you foot up and L flipper up? I'm like, this is my daughter I'm talking to, but it's all good though, because she's enjoying what she's doing, having fun at it, and I'm a proud father because she's being successful at doing it. But it just kind of coincides with that whole family thing of people being involved with football. Mike, my son Brandon, who played in the NFL, played in the CFL. So, it all started my dad coaching us and coaching me in the military on the different Air Force bases in and around the world, Hawaii, Germany. And we had those American teams, and he was coaching, youth football. And so those are the things that just kind of carried over from him and my mom and then to the kids.
What's interesting here is as I moved out of coaching myself here about 6 years ago, it's further and further away now, and I got into this role at the AFCA. We obviously put this education on, and every year we have some type of breakout session that's work-life balance. And me, as I'm in this role, I'm always want to make sure I get the rooms filled and I'm giving coaches content they want. I'm always so surprised when I walk into that work-life balance room that thing is packed, to the brim. It's guys in there trying to figure out how to manage it all and be a good husband, be a good father, and also be a tremendous coach. And the hours sometimes make it tough. And so it's amazing how you've been able to embrace that, and it seems like all your family has really embraced a little bit. Obviously it kind of came from you, probably many of their love of football. How have you been able to make it a family affair, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, so we talk about faith family football being the priorities for the program and how I operate, and so the faith part, as sharing a story about my daughter, me being a match, 10,000 to 1 odds. The faith aspect of being a police officer in the city of Richmond, when I got cut from the Cowboys, having someone put a gun in my face and pull the trigger and not go off. So the faith element is very much real. The family part of it is I'm a father of 7. My first marriage, I had three kids, Mike Jr., who's on the staff, Brandon, who's played in the CFL and the NFL, and then Kristen, who played basketball at Virginia under Coach Debbie Ryan, and then went on, played overseas, and then now she's been playing professional women's football, for about 7, 8 years now. And my wife, Regina, who we've been together for 20 plus years, through Tyson and all the other, my one daughter, Jason's getting ready to graduate from nursing school at Pittsburgh. My son, Corbin, works for the LA Clippers in California. I have a daughter, Madison, that goes to Virginia Tech. So it's like the family aspects of it are because I always want coaches on staff to also feel that, that you are a husband, you're a father, not just a coach, but there's a lot of other things that you have to be. And it's important that on Sundays or some things like that, when there's downtime, that our families come here. And so our players can see our coaches interact as husbands or fathers. Babe, honey, let me change the baby's diaper, whatever it is, because we play that male testosterone, have that image in our guys' minds all the time. But you know what? But you are a husband or a father and a son or brother or uncle or whatever it may be. And I think the more players can see you in those roles, and then they can understand that, you are not just a football player, but you're so many other roles that you got to be really good at as well. This whole transition from A to Z is not just about the football part. It's like, how do you treat women? How do you do different? How do you get ready for the workplace other than the NFL? How do you have engaging conversations that are difficult? How do you handle yourself with NIL? There's so many different things that you do but I want our players to see our coaches interacting in a way that says, you know what, this guy's just not a football player. I see all the other aspects of the hats that he wears as well.
I absolutely love that. What I really like is a head ball coach on here saying this. You know, a lot of times I get guys on the podcast and their assistants, and they're like, hey, I work for a great guy, you know. And of course, you just got to take that with a grain of salt. But just hearing a head coach just get on here and talk about the importance of that, and you know, the message that you're sending to those student athletes that, you know, all depending on the type of coach you are, only ever me seeing you yelling or you know, correcting and never really seeing that tender side, the loving side, the caring side. You know, that so often, especially as males, need to maybe be a little bit more in tune with. Now, it's kind of naturally rolls right into my next question here. You have this Real Talk seminars deal that you put together this spring, where your student athletes, they kind of discuss you know, anything along the lines of personal branding, career engagement, mental health, life post football. You know, number one, what got you decide? What made you decide to implement this type of thing? And then you know, why did you see this important as the overall development of your players? Why did you see this as important?
Yeah, you know, it's a great question, but you know, all our lives have been we've experienced different things in our lives, and we've been under different tutelages. We've been under people that have been role models and mentors to us. And so you take some of your life experiences, and having been a police officer now, I did kind of the undercover, follow people around. I've seen the worst of what people have do to each other. And coming out of that, when the George Floyd incident happened, all the different things that happened, I know what an effective arrest looks like in those things. But literally what comes out of your mouth is the power of life and death. You can escalate or de-escalate situations. You can encourage or discourage. And so when conflict and things like that, those kind of things occur, then you always want to have an opportunity and a venue, an avenue for players to discuss their feelings or their take on things. And for example, you know, I know this was just happened recently, but in an exit interview, as we finished our spring practice, I asked each player, the 70, 80 plus players I had in my exit interview, is tell me what you thought about the Will Smith and Chris Rock situation. And I wanted to hear from them about the things that, you know, about where we are or where they are in terms of understanding, you know, how you go about doing things. And there was a large group, large percentage that said could have been handled differently. The approach could have been done differently. The response was on a national, global scale. There were some other things that, you know, that could have that tied into that. But the point being was, I get it. People call us things. They do things to us. Well, our feelings are valid at that moment. But it's our actions, reactions. It's the consequences of those that we're responsible for or in charge of. It's all those other things that sometimes, you know, that get neglected because we're in the throes of passion. We're in the throes of making a decision like right here and right now. So I wanted that kind of discussion. And so healthy discussions like that, healthy discussions about you're going on a date and, you know, how are you going to treat the young lady that you're with? You know, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. You know, so you got to have real talk sessions where people are going to give their opinions. And then you go back and forth with dialogue about in the bigger scheme of things, how does that fit in terms of your personal branding? How does that fit in terms of if you're on a team or represent a university, you know, how does that fit? You know, so we encourage those types of things, anywhere from interviews, how to write a resume, how to tie a tie. You'd be surprised about how many guys take the clip on and just put a book on there, you know. So no, we're gonna learn how to tie a tie, you know. So it's those aspects of it that you hope you show players that they'll be much more than just a football player on the football field. All the other things that it's going to be important to them as they start to, you know, mature and move on to their next life. So, you know, work, because it's not always going to be NFL National Football League. It's going to be NFL not for long, you know. So getting ready for those things.
Coach, you know, you look back on your coaching career. 2008 was your first head job at University of Richmond. All the way up until now, you've been a head coach minus one season at Maryland. That's correct, right?
Yeah.
And so you've been a head coach all these years, and I would imagine year 1, year 2, year 3, what you weren't doing real talk seminars, correct?
I was sharing the life experiences. I didn't know what to call it at that time, but during the course of time, you started to put things together and say, you know what, my coaching manual, the time that we had during training camp, you started to put those things together because all of us borrow ideas from other people, but nothing better than taking your own life experiences, having been a police officer, a bone marrow donor, the first coach of color at a lot of these at the three predominantly the institutions that I've been at, except for Howard. I mean, those are experiences, and those are things that you can share and put in the proper context of how you go about still being very purposeful and intentful about how you go about doing things, having some success, dealing with the losses and the disappointments, but still being a family guy. So you put all those things together, and you demonstrate them as you move on and as you take on different programs. So I have had those aspects at Richmond, obviously at UVA, at Howard, and then now here as well. So it's been really a blessing.
Yeah, it's amazing. I can only imagine just how much, especially as you put such a huge emphasis on some of your experiences that you've had personally, to be able to pour into those guys. The more experience you got, the more you're able to develop this thing, and just how it's grown. Especially being a head coach for so long, sometimes you see guys that are still doing the same things they were doing in 08. Especially if you had success like you've had, it's hard to continue to grow. So that's fantastic. Now, just as we're talking about some of that this successful career that you had, and I do love the fact that you pinpointed, been an African American head coach at a lot of these institutions. That although I'm a Texas guy, so I don't really call Virginia the South, but it is technically still the South. It's amazing to kind of see how long you've been able to have that longevity. What advice would you pass on to a lot of these young coaches that listen to this podcast that are looking to make that step into some head coaching roles? Like, how do you have that longevity? How do you continuously strive to get better? And how do you adapt at all the different type of universities that you've been?
Yeah, that's another great question as far as development. That's one of the things. We all stand on the shoulders of other people that have helped us. I've really coached for some really good coaches. Al Grove was a great coach for me when I was an assistant at Virginia. Jim Reed, what was another coach, Tom O'Brien, guys that they gave me opportunities to do other things. And I guess I'll say it like this. If you want to wear the crown, you got to carry the crown. And what I mean is any of the jobs that you do or the liaison areas that you have, you're in charge of. You're the assistant camp director. You're in charge. You're the liaison for the strength and conditioning coach. You do the community service. Whatever you do it to the best of your ability, as if you are the head coach of that responsibility. Sometimes you think, okay, I got this extra deal I got to do. Then if you're going to be in charge of something that's a liaison that's impacted by the program that's given to you from the head coach, then take that and run with it and be productive, be efficient, show your creativity, all those types of things, because then that also is going to reflect on your ability to think on your feet, to have that kind of creativity and that foresight to do things. And when you do that, then head coaches have a chance to look at the opportunities. Perhaps, this guy can stand in front of a room and hold the attention of a room, or communicate to guys, or his coaching, teaching acumen is such at a high level, I'm going to put him in a coordinator position. But you have to demonstrate those strengths by the other things that you're doing. So you want to wear that big hat, then all the other responsibilities that you have, that you will have, and sometimes go in and ask, hey coach, can I assist with the camp? Can I do the special teams part? Give me the returners or whatever it may be. So I think it's important that as coaches start to develop, we all want to be, sometimes you don't want to be sitting in this seat now, being a head coach now. But there's a lot to do, and I get it. So along the way, any position you've ever had, let it speak volumes in terms of your input, your effort, and be where your feet are, and worry about doing a good job there, because then other people will recognize the doors will be open to allow you to take those steps to move further in the profession.
Absolutely. Well, Coach, before I let you go here, I did want to tap on one more thing, because obviously we're talking about some of the success that you had, and obviously implement a program culture, schematics, all that kind of stuff. At the end of the day, it still does rely on the Jimmies and the Joes, though. And, having a deeply rooted background in Virginia, just been in that area so much and been in that state. And I believe 3 spots, right? You've been in Virginia as a head coach in 3 spots. Would it been so important to kind of be able to recruit locally, especially in a talented state like Virginia? How have you been able to kind of develop those relationships, cultivate those relationships, and keep them alive to be able to go and recruit and make sure you got players that can represent well on Saturdays?
Yeah, another great question because, I grew up in this area. My dad retired in the Air Force about 30-something years ago, and I went to Tabb High School for 3 years, home of Terry Kirby and Chris Slade. And he retired. We moved into the Bethel district, went to Bethel High School, home of Allen Iverson. So we finished there. And then as you grow up, I went on to Richmond as a player, then became a coach there and all those things. So you start developing those community of relationships. Like I said, my father would coach and teach us. My brother played at Virginia, with guys at Tiki and Rondé Barber. George Wells was the head coach there. I talked about my sister. So it's that community of people that you're born into or you're around, and then we go on, we do our different things, but you come back home, and you always come back to that place of familiarity, and you always come back to those, the Boo Williams, who's on AAU great basketball mind, czar, one of the best in the country. I went to Bethel while he was going to Phoebus High School. So there's a familiarity with those areas, those spots, those Boys and Girls Club directors, those places where people went. And then, you just hopefully that with the thing that you do, I pray to God that every place that I've been, I've done it with honor and integrity. I know it's a tough profession when you're judged on wins and losses. That's part of it. But also, treating someone's son as if you want your son to be treated. And when you do those things and parents are looking to send their son somewhere where they're like, okay, I know this guy, I know this family. There's players. I still keep in contact with all the players I've ever coached, from Chris Long all the way to, guys at this place now. There's guys here at Mike Tomlin was a player here when I was coaching here. Sean McDermott was a player here when I was coaching. Dan Quinn, who's been the head coach, of the Atlanta Falcons, and now he's the Cowboys. He was my assistant D-line coach, but maintaining those relationships and having the opportunity to say, you need to go play for that guy, then it's very much appreciated. And like I said, it's a blessing, to be around this long in this state, coming from the family that I come from, having an opportunity for all these prestigious universities in the state of Virginia, and knowing that 804-757-540-703, all those area codes are excellent areas for any school to come recruit student athletes.
Absolutely, Coach. Well, I sure appreciate you sharing that. And once again, I always enjoy my opportunities to sit down and talk with you and pick your brain. And, thanks for all that you do for our great organization.
And thank you. Anytime, let me know. I'd love to chop it up with you or any young coaches out there. Like I said, I think I've been really blessed to have been where I've been and done some of the things. And I find myself now wanting to give back in a way that, just talking about how you can do those things that we talked about. So anytime you want to talk about that, I'd love to do it.
Yes, sir. I'm definitely going to hold you to that, Coach. Thanks again, and good luck with spring recruiting.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Inside the Headset. If you heard anything on this episode that you would like to learn more information about, head over to afcapodcast.com, where you can find every episode and all of the corresponding show notes. While you're there, take a second to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for the show, please let us know by sending an email to podcast@afca.com. Make sure to follow the podcast on Twitter at Inside the Headset and tag it when you share each episode. You can stay up to date with all things AFCA by following the @WeAreAFCA Twitter account. Every episode of Inside the Headset can also be found on your favorite audio streaming platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. If you are not currently a member of the AFCA, Be sure to find us online at afca.com and apply to join over 10,000 NFL, college, and high school coaches from around the country who are striving to be the best they can be. With an AFCA membership, you gain invaluable access to the annual AFCA convention, the bi-monthly magazine, and the new and improved digital library, which contains thousands of videos and articles contributed by hundreds of current and former football coaches. You can also visit afcainsider.com to sign up for our free weekly email newsletter on the right-hand side of the screen. It comes out every Tuesday at lunch and is filled with great articles and stories written by many of the same coaches you hear on the podcast. It's geared to help you become a better coach tomorrow than you are today. Be sure to connect with me on Twitter at Coach Mario Price, and remember, the AFCA is not just an annual convention. It is an association that continually promotes education, guidance, and networking. But it is also so much more than that. The AFCA is about celebrating the past and educating the future. It is about developing great coaches who will produce great teams and even better people. So invest in your skill set and impact today by engaging with the AFCA.